Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Kiera Osborne.
And I'm Krista Shepard. Here are some of the stories we're following today in the OTR newsroom. A year and a day since the Hamas attack on Israel set off events that have reverberated since and seem likely to reverberate well into the future. In the Middle East, around the world, and of course on many campuses, including ours. Here at TMU, the anniversary was marked separately by students supporting Israel and those supporting the cause of the Palestinian people.
Hillel is an international Jewish students group. The TMU chapter of Hillel held a vigil yesterday in a room on campus, whose location was known only to those who registered in advance, an indication of the apprehension felt by some. Matt Katzman was there, and he brings us this story.
It was a somber memorial on the anniversary of last year's terror attacks. Students and community members gathered to remember the almost 1,200 Israelis who were killed that day, and the 250 who were taken hostage, most of whom have since been killed or died in captivity. Jewish students from a range of programs and years came to speak about their connections to the attacks of October 7th. Organizers had put together a collection of images and artwork, scenes from the day of the attack by Hamas, also photography and paintings that had been created during their lives by some of the victims from that day. One TMU student in second-year architecture spoke about her cousin Dor Sadeh, who was called into combat and killed on October 9th in Kibbutz Kfar Aza. She said that day forever changed her and that a piece of her heart and soul had been taken away, that she will never feel whole again. Another student spoke about his sister's friend, Ben Mizrahi, originally from Vancouver, a former IDF medic who was killed on October 7th at the Nova Music Festival, after turning around to help others who had been injured. About Mizrahi, he said, "We will never bring back Ben, but what we can do is live our lives as he did, strongly, bravely, kindly, caring to one another, and full of life." The memorial continued with songs and poetry, including one by Rachel Goldberg Polin, the mother of Israeli hostage Hirsch Polin, who was taken hostage and killed in captivity, as well as Hebrew prayers of Misha Berach to heal those from suffering and the mourner's Kaddish, a prayer for the dead. The event concluded with the singing of Hatikva, Israel's national anthem. For On the Record News, I'm Matthew Katzman.
Also yesterday, a much noisier affair as the grounds and streets around Queen's Park erupted with the familiar sounds of pro-Palestinian protests. Our OTR reporter was there.
I'm Hssena Arjmand. It's Monday evening here in Queen's Park. These people are here to demonstrate their support for the resilience and resistance of Palestinian people in Gaza. It was a year ago today that an attack on Israel by Hamas triggered a response by the Israeli military that has devastated Gaza and has left more than 40,000 people dead in the territory, both civilian and military.
So today is officially the 365th day of the Gaza genocide. It's been 365 days of the world watching a live genocide, which has never happened before.
Syed also mentioned that these demonstrations are a way for people to vent their emotions with their community and to show others how they feel. A member of Militant for Palestine mentions issues with the media and their coverage.
So essentially what we're trying to do here today is we're trying to put forth the correct narrative. With media, sometimes our story gets out wrong. This didn't start on October 7th. It's been happening for 76 years and more.
The demonstrations over the year have spread awareness for Palestine and have had the impact to gain more supporters.
Well, I'm actually here today because as someone who used to be a former Zionist, so I used to be very pro-Israel, I learned, I think it was like 2-3 years ago, how that has been like a whole false narrative. But then there was one time when I was walking from a job that I decided to look at the pro-Palestine protest, and that's when I actually asked the question, saying, what does from the river to the sea mean? And that's when they explained it to me. And it was a whole different perspective compared to what I was told by the pro-Israel side.
The event last October 7th and Israel's subsequent retaliation against Hamas has brought the Middle East to the brink of a full-scale regional war. Here at On the Record News, we'll see if demonstrations like this proliferate in the weeks ahead, following the one-year mark of October 7th. For OTR News, I'm Hssena Arjmand.
Thanks, Hssena. A man in his 20s has died after being shot in North York last night. Paramedics transported the man from Trethewey and Black Creek Drives to the hospital, where he was pronounced dead. Police are speaking with witnesses and reviewing surveillance footage. They're asking anyone with information to call them at 12 Division.
The sexual assault case of billionaire businessman Frank Stronach is set to be moved from Peel Region to Toronto, putting the case over to next month. Yesterday, a Crown attorney said the prosecutors had agreed to move the case to Toronto, where the majority of offenses are alleged to have occurred. Stronach has been accused by 13 women and charged with 18 crimes.
In other news, just over a week after the devastation of Hurricane Helene in the U.S., another one comes along that meteorologists say could be worse. Hurricane Milton is sweeping across the Gulf of Mexico, heading toward landfall tomorrow at or near Tampa Bay on Florida's west coast. Tampa International Airport has suspended all operations. And at Toronto Pearson Airport, the storm threat is already causing flight disruptions.
Now let's have a look at the other stories we're working on today and this week in our On the Record newsroom. Standing by live in the newsroom is Wyatt Gilliland. Wyatt, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Krista. This week, our OTR reporter Joshua Joseph is leaving town. He's going to try to figure out why so few people are traveling in the other direction, to Toronto. Josh will be following up on a report that says white-collar workers in Toronto are returning to the office at lower rates than in just about any other city in the world. Toronto office workers spend an average of slightly more than 2.5 days in the office per week. Contrast that with, say, Paris, where workers come in an average of 3.5 days per week. Josh is going to speak to experts about what might be going on. And if you're watching this from home and not the office, he may even knock on your door. Look for that story on our website later this week. Ever ridden an e-scooter? OTR reporters Mehmet Oner and Katie Bell are whizzing around Toronto to figure out if electric scooters are actually safe. Currently, you don't need a license to operate an e-scooter. Mehmet and Katie have got their hands on a poll that says nearly 60% of Canadians want people who operate e-scooters and e-bikes to be licensed. But with terrible traffic and spotty public transit, what does Toronto think? They'll have more on that story this week on our website. Shifting gears, OTR reporter Claire Dufour is asking the tough questions with a critical look at refugee housing in Toronto. She'll be covering a new housing complex for asylum seekers and why this kind of infrastructure is rare in the city. And finally, our OTR podcasters are infiltrating TMU's campus to hear from students what they think about Reading Week. Be sure to listen to the podcast and the conversation this week on OTR's official website. Back to you, Kiera.
Thanks, Wyatt. A computer scientist from the University of Toronto is a co-winner of this year's Nobel Prize for Physics. Professors Jeffrey Hinton at U of T and John Hopfield of Princeton won through their work in evolving machine learning using artificial neural networks. While machine learning has advanced artificial intelligence, Professor Hinton says he worries about the threat of AI getting out of control.
Nuit Blanche is by now a well-established annual arts and culture event in Toronto. And while it has already come and gone for another year, we're still going to hear from OTR reporter Grace Draznin, who brings us the story on Nuit Blanche 2024.
This is Grace Draznin with On the Record News. It is October 5th and we are here in downtown Toronto at Nuit Blanche, a 24-hour art exhibit that takes place once a year. This year, the theme is Bridging Distance, and we are asking exhibit goers what exactly that means to them.
My perspective, I see that Each project will bring like something like the story from the artist. They want to transfer the message from their own story for the audience, for visitor to feel their story. So
Beautiful. Su-Ying Lee, one of the 3 acclaimed local curators this year, called in and spoke a little bit about what bridging distance means to her and her colleagues.
Bridging distance. For me, my overall exhibition theme just dovetailed nicely. Mine is about physical and emotional highs and lows, looking retrospectively, even though, I think in some ways we still are in the pandemic, but the idea of distance in pandemic also similar to mine, physical distance, emotional distance, distance between loved ones.
We also spoke to Stevie Labar, a routine exhibit goer, about how this year's theme can also be interpreted by the distance between each exhibit. In previous years, the art exhibits were spread out around the city, whereas this year, most were concentrated on the lakeshore.
It's definitely very different from in the past, where it used to be very spread out, and this year it's more consolidated, so I'm interested in what that will be like and how they'll execute it.
Amazing. Until next year, I'm Grace Draznin, On the Record News.
Thanks, Grace. Time now through this week in entertainment. Here's Emily Zhang.
Attention fans of Princess Diaries, Anne Hathaway has revealed on Instagram that a new Princess Diaries movie is in the works. The upcoming film will continue the beloved franchise from the early 2000s. In a video last week that quickly went viral, Hathaway brought back her iconic line, "Shut up," confirming Princess Diaries 3 with director Adele Lim. For those who may not remember, the Princess Diaries follows Mia Thermopolis, played by Hathaway, a regular teen who discovers she's the heir to a royal throne. In the original, Julie Andrews played Mia's estranged grandmother, Queen Clarice Rinaldi, the ruler of Genovia. So far, we don't know who, if anyone, will be playing that role in the sequel. Now, for Spotify users, get ready for some changes. Prices for all premium plans in Canada are going up. This follows a new rule from Canada's telecom regulator, the CRTC. The new rule requires non-Canadian streaming service to pay a 5% tax on their Canadian earnings. The revenue is intended to support Canadian music creators and broadcasters. Here's a breakdown. The individual plan now costs $12.69, up from $10.99. The student plan is up only slightly. It was $5.99, now it's $6.39. While the dual plan, that's for any 2 people to share, jumps to $17.89. That's nearly $3 more than the old price of $14.99. But even that isn't the biggest increase. The family plan is now $20.99 a month, up $4, which seems like a lot given the new tax is 5%. And speaking of music, fans of Oasis rejoice. The Manchester music legends and famous feuding brothers have added Toronto to their highly anticipated reunion tour. The band is famous for 90s hits such as Wonderwall and Don't Look Back in Anger. American rock band Cagey Elephant will be the opening act. The show will happen at the new Rogers Stadium in Downsview next August 24th and 25th. Tickets are already sold out. And that is all for your entertainment news. I'm Emily Zhang. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Emily. And from entertainment to your weather for the week, here's Laviza Syed.
Thanks. Let's dive into your weather forecast. Today, we will be seeing a high of 14 degrees, mainly sunny, but partly cloudy. It's looking similar down in St. Catharines with a high of 15 degrees and mainly sunny, with just a 30% chance of rain. A few degrees colder up in Barrie today with a high of 12 and a mix of sun and clouds. Kitchener and Guelph both sit at a temperate 13 degrees today. Oshawa and Hamilton are both seeing highs of 14 degrees. Moving into your 5-day forecast, here's what you can expect. Wednesday will be bringing a chance of showers with an overnight low of 3 degrees, so keep your umbrella handy. Thursday will have clear skies with a high of 14 degrees and a mix of sun and clouds. Make sure you have a sweater for those chilly mornings. Friday is looking up with a high of 19 degrees and sunny skies with a minimal chance of rain. Ending off the week, Saturday will bring a mix of sun and clouds with the chance of showers, so be sure to plan any weekend activities carefully. And that's your weather report. I'm Laviza Syed. Back to you.
Thanks, Laviza. And now, back to our reporter Matt Katzman, this time bringing us this week's sports news. Matt?
The New York Mets are moving on to the National League Division Series. Coming up to bat in the top of the ninth of the winner-go-home game of the Wild Card Series, Mets first baseman Pete Alonso hit the game-winning 3-run home run to take the lead against the Milwaukee Brewers. The Mets had failed to score a run in the game up until that point, struggling to hit Brewers right-handed pitcher Tobias Myers. Myers completed 5 shutout innings, giving way to relief pitchers Trevor McGill, Nick Mears, and Freddie Peralta to keep the Mets off the scoreboard until the ninth. However, Brewers closer Devin Williams struggled against the stingy Mets hitters, allowing a walk to Francisco Lindor, a single to Brandon Nimmo, and the game-winning home run to Alonso. In the bottom of the ninth, David Peterson closed out the game for the Mets to take them to the next round of the playoffs, where they will face off against the Philadelphia Phillies in a matchup of division rivals. 4-time NBA All-Star Karl Anthony Towns is on the move to the New York Knicks. The Knicks acquired the star center from the Minnesota Timberwolves in return for Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, and the Detroit Pistons' first-round pick in 2025. Towns has spent 9 seasons with the Timberwolves since being drafted as the first selection in the 2015 draft. In that time, he's averaged 23 points, 11 rebounds, and 3 assists. In a goodbye post to his old team, Towns said, "I arrived as a young man with a dream. Little did I know that this place would become my home and its people would become my family." Despite moving on from his longtime franchise, Towns said that playing for the Knicks is a childhood dream of his, having grown up cheering for the franchise. After a 50-win season last year, the Knicks look to build on a star-studded roster. Led by All-Star Jalen Brunson, the franchise also acquired Mikal Bridges and re-signed OG Anunoby this summer to bolster their roster for the upcoming season. While an already depleted Kansas City Chiefs roster takes another hit with the injury to star receiver Rashee Rice. He has been placed on the injured reserve and will miss a minimum of 4 games. On a freak play after an interception in their game against the Los Angeles Chargers, Rice tripped over Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes and injured his right knee. The Chiefs medical team initially believed the injury to be an ACL tear, which would likely rule out Rice for the remainder of the season and even put the start of next season at risk for him. However, it may not be ACL after all. Testing has been inconclusive, and Rice will undergo a procedure this week to determine the severity of the injury. Quarterback Mahomes remains optimistic about the injury to his top targeted receiver. He said, "Hopefully we have him back soon." And that's all for sports. For On the Record, I'm Matthew Katzman. Back to you in the studio.
Thanks, Matt. And that's all for On the Record News this October 8th, 2024. I'm Krista Shepard.
And I'm Kira Osborne. Join us at OTR News next week as we bring you stories from our newsroom.
And for the latest 24/7, visit our website ontherecordnews.ca. Have a great day.